Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with another set of Christmas cards. Told you all, I'm just in a Christmas card making mood. Plus, I needed these, literally. I've had the stamp set sitting out for a while, and I couldn't get to getting these cards done till literally the last minute. However, slight bonus for those watching this video the day I'm posting this, which is Christmas Eve, or within the next day or two, because I don't know how long the sale will last. When I was getting all the links for all the supplies, I saw that this stamp set with the coordinating dies is like 60% off right now. Like, just incredible deal. And again, I don't know how long it'll last or supplies or anything, but I will have a link in the description box below the video, as well as a link to like the sale category, because there's a few good little steals in there that, again, are still available as of me posting this. So this is the Merry Christmas Trees stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. And I wanted to make a super bright, cheerful little set of Christmas cards that would serve a dual purpose. You can either use them to hold gift cards or money, which I will show at the end. So I took panels of Simon's smooth white cardstock. I lined up some of the individual trees from the set onto them, and then anti-static powder tool, inking up the stamps with clear embossing ink, and then coating them with detail white embossing powder. Repeat. Depending on how many of these you got to make, this is another one of those designs that honestly, like, a person could do a ton of them if you wanted to mass produce a bunch. I only did 3 because that's all I needed, but I just kept repeating the process, carefully setting aside the other ones. I've mentioned this in other times. It just depends on what I'm making and what's going on. Whether or not I heat emboss immediately, because more often than not, I'll end up, I get an elbow in it, you know, or I knock something over, but I did okay with these. So after I'd coated all 3 of the stamped panels with the embossing powder, melted that with my heat tool, which is very boring on camera because it just disappears and it's boring, but the fun stuff's going to come in a minute. So melted everything, tilted it back and forth in the light to make sure everything is smooth and shiny and melted. And then after I do that, I am going to do ink blending. So like the title, the thumbnail, obviously I went rainbow because who doesn't love rainbow anything? And I don't know, I get a kick out of rainbow Christmas cards. I don't know what it is. I just love it. However, if a person didn't want to do rainbow colors, these would look really, really nice doing different shades of green. Like a bunch, like each one a different shade of green ink would look really pretty. You know, it could be fun. And really, the sky's the limit. You could do any colors, you know, do different shades of pinks or reds or, you know, again, sky's the limit. Have fun with it. So before I get to the actual ink blending though, I wanted to do my little background panels because I wanted this to have time to dry. So this is some craft heavy stock, and I had die cut them to smaller than my A2 card front. So these actually ended up being like kind of my go-to panel size for A2 cards, like 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And I put them in my splat box. And then I'm using my Amsterdam liquid white paint. Anything like white craft paint. I've used picket fence, distress paint, white gouache, any of those things. I have so many options for splatter, of course. Right now, this is my current favorite. And then I switch back to the gouache. And then I switch to this. You know, it just depends. Heavily splattered those panels, though. So I did that, set those aside to dry. And then I took all the coordinating wafer dies for those trees. And I did a little arrangement to figure out how I was going to put them on those panels. And once I had that laid out, as you can see on the screen there, then I knew which trees I was going to ink blend in which color. Since I was already going to go rainbow, I already had my ink colors chosen, one for each tree. And then having that layout figured out just made it easy. I could have die cut everything first and then done the ink blending, but because these are not necessarily delicate, but just smaller, it's easier to keep everything like as it is on the cardstock. And then I just used a bit of Post-it tape around each tree to keep the ink contained. And then I'm blending on different colors of Simon's Positively saturated inks with their small blending brushes. So I just kept reusing the Post-it tape, would mask off around the tree and blend. So I used Simon's cherry ink for the red. The orange is grapefruit. And then I moved on to yellow, which was Simon's Sunbeam. And I also have just my microfiber cloth here because the inks, and these inks are like this too, but almost any ink is going to do that, especially reds, purples, any ones with those certain pigments that just like to be finicky. They'll kind of sit on top of the embossing. So the cloth, I just quickly give it a swipe once I'm done blending to wipe off the ink that's sitting on top of that white embossed image. And then I would go on to the next one. So I've got my little ink blending, Pawsitively, everything tool to hold my little ink pad. I got my blending brushes, my Post-it tape, and I just go in order, all three in the same color at once, and then go on to the next one and the next one. This just made it, again, easier, even with all these colors. But again, it would look real. I need more days in the week, and I need more hours in the day. Because as I was editing this, I'm like, ooh, these would look really nice. And yeah, like all different shades of green would look beautiful. Different shades of purple, blues. Yeah. Even if you wanted to go like monochromatic and do them in like grays, could look really cool with a kind of brighter background. Like, so many ideas, man. Anyway. I worked my way over. I did, there was cherry, grapefruit, sunbeam. Green was perfection. My aqua blue was surf. Purple was amethyst. And then the pink was peony. Once I got to the last color and I was done all of my blending and wiped off any sitting on top of the embossed images, I took those coordinating wafer dies and just taped them into place with little bits of washi tape. And then once I get all of these taped into place, I'll do all my die cutting and then rinse and repeat. Do all the die cutting at once. I did all the stamping at once, all the heat embossing at once, the backgrounds at once, the ink blending at once, the die cutting at once. That's what makes doing multiples a lot easier. I don't really do the like massive amounts of mass production I used to in the back in the day. Like I used to do, wedding invites and like large amounts of Christmas cards, like all those sorts of things where you do 100, 200 cards at a time. I enjoy the process. I just don't do it anymore. Like I'll just do a few, but same idea. Like always, if you do all the steps in batches, it makes it go a lot smoother. So I pulled out a big scrap of black cardstock, lined that up in my MISTI, and then I took a couple of the sentiments from that same stamp set, lined those up, and same thing, anti-static powder tool, inked up the sentiment with clear embossing ink, stamped it, and then I just kept moving the cardstock down so I could stamp this multiple times. And then I'm going to heat emboss it with that same white embossing powder. So pour that over, tap off the excess. I'll melt that with my heat tool. Once this one was done, I'm going to use one of Simon's sentiment label wafer dies. And originally I was going to just die cut them and then trim off the ends to, closer to the sentiment. But I discovered after I was done die cutting them that they fit perfectly, like edge to edge, across these craft heavy stock panels. So it was meant to be. So I just left it like that and adhered them into place with craft tacky glue. And again, off camera, I did my first card front there. I assembled it how I wanted everything to be, figured out like which ones I wanted to pop up with foam tape, etc. And then I used that as my template. And it just makes the rest, regardless if it's 2 or 20 or 100 afterwards, come together so much faster because I've already got everything figured out. So I've adhered the ones I wanted flat against the background with craft tacky glue. And then the remaining little trees, I popped up with a variety of foam tapes. Like I used some Trinity foam tape for this one little orange tree, which was like my thickest dimensional adhesive. And then I've got some little thin 3D foam squares, some regular foam squares, just to give that kind of variation. Like honestly, and again, if a person wanted to keep these flat and just adhere them, that would look great too. But I'm not mailing these, like I'm personally delivering these because I'm making them the day before Christmas. So those are the times I'm like, I'm totally fine with the dimension. I don't got to worry about adding extra postage, anything like that. I don't mind adding the extra postage, just sometimes, when you're mailing out like a ton, it can add up. But I did all of the little bits of dimension. And then on the insides of the cards, there is this great big stamp in that same Merry Christmas trees set. The stamp is huge. It's like 6.5 inches wide with kind of like all the trees together. This would work really nicely on like slimline cards, that sort of a thing. But I was originally just going to stamp it in like Simon's khaki ink, or, you know, an ink that went with the Craft Heavy stock. But then I was like, oh, these would look really nice stamped in those same rainbow of inks. So that's what I did. I started with the yellow. This is why it's become a habit you guys have seen in a lot, because, you know, I've done a lot of videos in like rainbow colors. I generally always start with yellow, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's cardstock or ink blending or inking up a stamp. I always start with yellow. And it's because of the inking up a stamp, I start with the yellow because that's the lightest color. And that prevents my yellow ink pad from picking up a bunch of the color. I don't mind my ink pads picking up a bit of the ink, because they do, but it's on the very edge and they're fine. I've never had a problem with it. But you can't really see it in the video, but I hold the ink pads at an angle and I'm just using the very edge of the ink pad to ink up each little section of the stamp. And after the first one, the rest come faster because I don't clean the stamp in between. I kind of use what's left of the ink on there as my little template. So I know exactly where to place the colors and it just goes even quicker. So I use those edges of all those ink pads to ink up the stamp in this rainbow of colors. And I love it. This would work again as a card front. If you wanted to go even faster and simpler and yet still have like really bright, fun colors, this would be the way to go. And again, this would look really good doing like a multiple shades of green or whatever, you know? So fun. So the last thing I did was I took strips of that Craft Heavy stock and I am just adding adhesive on each end of these strips. These strips are 5.5 inches wide. They're going to be the full width of the card. And I'm just putting a bit of score tape on each end. You could use liquid adhesive too. It doesn't matter as long as you let the liquid adhesive dry. So they're only adhered on each end, and then the middle area has no adhesive. And this is what I was talking about being able to include a gift card or cash in just the simplest way. You know, there's a bunch of wafer dies and things like that nowadays, and I've shown some in videos that work great to hold gift cards. I couldn't find mine. I couldn't find them, so I was like, you know, I'm just gonna do this. This works. It's great. Whatever. So adhere those little strips onto the insides of the cards, and then I'll show in a second how I get them to hold the monies. So got those adhered the card fronts to the card bases, and that finished these off. So they're just bright and cheerful, got some splatter in there, love, and then Craft Heavy stock as always, massive favorite. And then on the inside, I'm going to show with this other card, it holds some monies, or a gift card would fit there perfectly as well. Either or, whatever works. Our plastic Canadian monies don't like to fold very well, but they still work, you know. Fold it somewhat and just stick it in there, and it's good to go. It's being held in place. And who doesn't love opening a card with money in it? Or a gift card? Anything, really. Love it. So, like I mentioned, I will have links below the video to my blog post. I'll have a link to all the supplies I used. I will also link below the video to that sale category that I mentioned, so you guys can check that out if you see this in time. And if not, regardless, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos and all your support. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.